Despite superficial similarities, Boston's busing crisis was vastly different from the riots of Little Rock, and actually more similar to desegregation in New Orleans. In Boston, those affected by school desegregation felt that they were being targeted for their lack of wealth. The officials were outsiders who viewed the poorer neighborhoods as parochial, prejudiced, and insulated areas with inadequate schooling. In a report made by the Kiernan Commission, it was found that 80% of racially unbalanced schools of Massachusetts were in Boston. Civil rights leaders, including Martin Luther King, set their sights on this. But when planners tried to forcibly change the system, white families to whom the neighborhood schools were precious places saw it as impractical, harsh, and unfair. Rich families remained unaffected and could send their children to expensive private schools. Poorer families' children were trapped by their lack of wealth. Many of the wealthier white families left the city because of the Second Great Migration of African Americans to northern cities. Avoiding discrimination from the South and finding skilled work in the North, black families settled in mostly impoverished communities. White families fled from this expanding city ghetto. Most of Boston's non-black population during the busing crisis was Irish, a group with a long history of struggling to better their standing in the U.S. They felt little sympathy or guilt for the African Americans' ordeals and were offended by how newcomers expected their rights they'd had taken years of political struggle to obtain to be handed to them on a silver platter by the rich whites of the suburbs. President Kennedy himself had come from the family of Irish politicians and officials in Boston, but now he was humiliated by his hometown. If his own supposedly open-minded state was unable to accept desegregation, how could he ask it of the South?
Individuals such as Louise Day Hicks emerged less as leaders than as byproducts. In Little Rock, the residents had been accepting of integration. The actual conflict had been fabricated by Orville Faubus. In Boston, like New Orleans, the movement Louise Day Hicks was supporting was one created by the people. Though it seems contradictory, her rise to power was a case in which democracy limited freedom. Had she not been forced to rely on the people's votes for re-election, she would more likely have acted on her own judgment. The unwillingness of the Bostonians to give in to desegregation is an example of tyranny of the majority. Outsiders sympathized with the NAACP and supported them, but those affected by the NAACP's demands were obstinately against them. Research has shown that support for civil rights grows by the percent which is unaffected by the movement. The selfish motivations of the protesters also overlapped with the movement of reactionary populism. The protesters sought to win liberty from the government and authorities. While the authorities were only trying to give rights to African Americans, they perceived forced busing as taking away their 14th Amendment rights. In fact, many of the protests mimicked the actions of the civil rights movement in the 60s. The parents of affected students had lived through the peak of civil rights movements and knew the power of organized protest. But instead of peacefully protesting racism, they were violently combating the commands of the upper class. Protesters genuinely believed they were in the right in fighting against the oppression of the middle class, judgmental elitists. It was a demonstration that the North was not as accepting and free-minded as it believed itself to be, but it wasn't truly a demonstration of racism. The Boston busing crisis was a demonstration exposing the very real problems of the lower class and the flaws of the political system.